please. It would be us, yeah. I am indeed. Fabulous.
You're VP of
Product strategy.
I can read that.
I like making it easy on everyone.
Hey. Good morning, everybody. My name is Raul Burial. I'm the Director-elect of Northwest Met, and at some point during the planning process for this conference, we had the idea to create a video and education summit because video and streaming is my passion, and I thought we'd be able to get enough people here to focus specifically on that subject, and I really wanted to get Kaltura to show up. It turns out it worked out exactly as planned. This is the first session in the Video and Education Summit, and Jeff Rubenstein from Kaltura, VP of Product Strategy, is here now to give us his presentation. Welcome, Jeff.
Great. Thank you. Raul, thank you. Thank you to OSU, and thank you to everyone for coming. My name is Jeff Rubenstein. I'm with Kaltura. My main role at Kaltura is I work on the interoperability standards with the IMS Global Group. I sit on, among other things, the Caliper Steering Committee. I focus on interoperability with our LMS partners, our hardware partners, lecture capture partners, et cetera, to help ensure that whatever your media strategy and whatever your future data strategy begins to look like, that we can support that vision. So today I'll say a few words about interoperability, data, and video, and what this is looking like for the future of video in education. So data is a big topic right now, and it can feel a bit overwhelming because there can be so much of it and there's so much you can do with it once you have it. And so what I'm going to paint a picture here is a bit about the long-term arc of the future. This is going to be, for most people, more than you can bite off in a year or even 2 or even 3. But it's important to begin thinking about your data strategy as well as your media management strategy, because this is going to be a wave of the future, especially in terms of how we can leverage data to help improve future student success. So video is today one of the most rich and important content types in education. It's being created in lots of places. It's being created by teachers making flipped classroom assets. It's being created in lecture theaters. It's being created by content providers. It's being created in content libraries that you can use and reuse and remix. Often and more of that is being created as OERs, open educational resources. And as the classroom of the future is reconfigured, or more precisely, the classrooms of the future, because the model of the classroom is changing, and we're making now various kinds of learning spaces that can be configured, reconfigured, and reused for different means. There's a question of how your video strategy fits in with your future classroom strategy or your strategy around learning spaces. So how do we make sure that video can fit flexibly into whatever your future classroom strategy is and whatever your future data strategy is? So the first thing is it's really important to think about how data from all of that video gets into a usable format and into a usable place. A lot of this is happening now with data from various sources like your LMS and your SIS. And We're now seeing specialized systems arise, the LRS, the Learning Record Store, and standards around how data gets from these various systems into the databases that you can use to begin generating interesting learning data. And video is an important part of that. So the first thing you start with is we need to start with a video management strategy that is based on an open architecture where data can flow into and out of those video sources and video systems, and that it's based on open standards. Because the world is now one where many vendors and many sources of both hardware and software need to play together. And the IMS Global Group is one of those groups that promulgates a number of these standards, many of which you're probably familiar with to some degree or other, like the LTI standard, which ensures the interoperability of various learning systems, like your LMS with your various tool providers that hang on to the LMS. In fact, if you haven't been keeping tabs in the last year or so, there's a new level of LTI standard coming out from the IMS Global Group called LTI Advantage, which was announced a few months ago. It's going to be official as of this November. And LTI is kind of a mature standard now. It's been out for about 10 years. And new levels of LTI have been introduced over time. And so to help make sure that it's clear to the community what level of LTI compliance every vendor is leveraging, they've come out with this new higher level called LTI Advantage. And I'm very happy to say that Kaltura is one of the 7 launch partners of LTI Advantage coming out this November. So that's important because you need to be able to pass data about who is viewing or who is doing an activity, in this case, who is viewing the video, to the video management system. You need to gather data about what that person is doing inside that video experience, bring that back to the LMS and to any learning record stores you may have. The second important group are the data telemetry standards, which are IMS Caliper and XAPI. IMS Caliper tends to be more common in education. XAPI you may also have heard of. That tends to be a little more common in corporate learning, but is also used to some degree in education, depending on what systems you use. These are both standards by which systems can send data about learner experience and interactions to systems like learning record stores in a format that they all know how to recognize and can consume in a standardized way. Kaltura happens to emit on both IMS Caliper and XAPI, depending on which one you happen to want to use. And the third and most important, I think, standard for this meeting is there's a new standard which is working its way through the IMS Global Consortium, which it takes time. But that we are one of the charter members of, called the IMS Open Video Capture Standard. If you're an IMS member, you can view the status of where the standard is and view the drafts on the IMS Global website. This standard is designed to ensure the openness of any capture or display system of video and the metadata it captures, and any open standard compliant media management system. What that means is the following. The earlier generations, let's say, of lecture capture systems, which were built very AV heavy, were also built on kind of this closed loop model of hardware and software, where you had to buy a specific hardware configuration, usually exceptionally expensive, and which you couldn't use with anything else. And you had to use that with a specific media management software solution that often locked up that content in proprietary formats and made it very hard to do with it what you wanted. You couldn't use it outside of that lecture capture context. This, we think, is a very bad idea. It restricts what hardware you can buy and what price you pay for that hardware and how you can deploy it. And it restricts what you can do with the media that you've captured. So the idea of the open capture standard is to kind of blow this open and make sure that you have the freedom to choose the hardware you want for the applications you want it for, and that in the media management system you're using, you can deploy, redeploy, remix, republish that media in any context you want, in any way you want. And let me just say a bit more about why, an anecdote about why this is important. Let's say, I'll give you an example. University of Manchester Metropolitan University. They have a mixture of stuff. They have some Extron equipment. They have some Crestron equipment. They have some HD webcams. They have a bunch of stuff. One of the reasons that they have some of the Extron equipment, they have the SMP 351s, which are outstanding boxes, by the way. They have those in certain rooms. And the reason they have those in certain rooms is that that particular appliance can not only stream and capture, it can also record to an HD card. And so one of the use cases for which they're using that appliance is test proctoring, where they're actually putting students in a room and they're turning on the Extron appliance. And they're saying, OK, now you're taking your test. And if we have any reason to suspect any funny business is going on, we have that recording. We'll keep on this card for 6 months. And we can review it after the fact. Now, they don't want to store this asset for long-term use. This has no longer-term value in terms of deploying in the LMS or putting it in a VOD library. They just want it for 6 months for test proctoring purposes. And then they wipe the HD card and start it all over again. Right? So they have a box they can use not only for lecture capture, but they have a box they can use for test proctoring, which is a great example of why it's important that you have the freedom to choose the hardware you want. Buy it as a commodity. You can budget it and plan for it as a commodity. Deploy it in the circumstances you want. And know that the media you collect with it will be compliant with the way you want to manage your media and your data going forward. So the vision that we have behind this standard is that we're going to promulgate a vision where you can begin capturing everything, everywhere, to your specifications according to your needs. And you can deploy different hardware configurations in different applications. So maybe in the couple of big lecture theaters, you want to deploy an Extron appliance or a Matrox appliance or a Winov appliance or a Kaltura appliance or an Epiphan appliance, right? You can do that. And then maybe in some middle-sized rooms, maybe you want to deploy in different learning spaces, configured differently. Maybe you have some huddle rooms or some working areas where you want to deploy some PTZ cameras. And maybe then in every other classroom you want to deploy at minimum an HD webcam on a Podium PC and maybe a document camera, which you can find lovely examples of here at the B&H counter and others, right? That's great. We'll take it all. And we'll manage it centrally. We'll grab whatever metadata any of those appliances will provide. Because what the Open Capture standard really specifies is, it specifies a very simple XML document that says, here's your asset, and here's all the metadata I know about that asset. What class it was recorded in, who's the professor, what time and date, what room it was in. And that will all feed into being able to then manage that piece of media however you like. So the idea is that while in the past, really, lecture capture has been just for the few large, expensive auditoriums, now we have a reality where you can capture from anywhere. Any configuration of classroom, any configuration of hardware appliances, all of which you see here. By the way, some of these beautiful smart panels, right, are also great. I mean, we have a number of applications where people have installed these beautiful smart panels, which are often touch sensitive, which are projecting the desktop. And the instructor is at the panel doing something on that panel, which is effectively the computer screen. They have an HD webcam or a capture appliance pointed at them. So what you're capturing now is actually two streams, or multiple streams. One, which is the instructor at the panel doing whatever he or she is doing, and the other, which is the panel itself and what's happening on that panel. And that gives you a very, very powerful image of what's happening in that classroom for whoever wasn't there at the time or wants to see it again or to reuse in other contexts. And that will all go into a centralized media library, which can then be enhanced with things like captioning and translations, which can be searched for, can be deployed, redeployed, remixed, et cetera, in any context in which that video has use, and then can send off the data about the viewer interaction with that asset. If you want to come by our stand, we can give you an example of what this looks like. But behind this, there's a number of software options you can use, one of which is our lecture capture application. That's what it looks like. It's a big red button. And you can either have the instructor go up there and push the big red button to start and stop the recording, or you can have it scheduled. You can either do the scheduling through our interface or a number of interfaces that we have integrations with, and that recording will start and stop automatically on whatever hardware is configured in that room. We can also show you health checks of all of the appliances in that room. So we can say if one of the appliances falls offline, and you can go and fix it. We'll give the instructor in the room alerts. Hey, this recording is scheduled to end in 5 minutes. Do you want to extend by 5 minutes to make sure that they get the entire recording? The idea is that instructors should not worry about this if they don't want to. They could just walk in and teach. If they do want to manage it by hand, they can. I was in Italy about a month ago doing this, and they said, ha, scheduling. Nothing in Italy ever starts or ends on time. They're like, we want the big red button. Yeah. Anyway, so that you can capture then from any of these devices. You can schedule an Extron or a Matrox or a Winov box to start and stop at a given time. That is, and by the way, it's just a simple iCal format, I mean, behind the scenes. But the advantage of this is, again, with the interoperability, is that if you use our tool to help with the scheduling, in that iCal, you can pack a bunch of metadata. You know who the teacher is. You know what the class is. You know what room it's in, what time, and where it should be deployed. And then, on top of that, and this is the strength of what Kaltura does at its core, is that we can then use that metadata to drive any arbitrary workflow you want around enhancing that asset. So if that asset needs to be captioned, if it needs to be translated, if it needs to be automatically published in the LMS, or if you want to wait until the instructor actually effects a publishing action, you can define these workflows as you like that specify that assets tagged in this way get treated in this way. So that's the vision, that you have a single media management system that can manage any set of open hardware devices, capture anything you want from anywhere, manage it centrally. And then, I'll move forward just a bit. Again, you can come see this at our booth. Comes the data side. Now, there's a lot of data about the media interactions. Did a user watch it? How far did they watch it? When did they drop off? Which is great, really important. But even more important is you want to know, did the user actually understand what they saw? And so the limitation of data just about media interactions is that it doesn't actually tell you whether or not somebody understood something. So the next thing to think about adding and having your instructors add are interactives. Moments in the video experience that will tell you whether or not the student actually learned something from what they saw. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could add into the video experience that will generate a lot more data about what is actually happening in that video. And just to show you a quick example, let me pop out of this for a moment. And I'm just going to show you a quick video. Yesterday we had a keynote presentation about open educational resources. And I want to show you an example of something that I love about open educational resources. And I really encourage you to go back to your campuses and think about this as something you can offer to the instructional design department and the teachers, because it's an incredibly powerful tool to create a lot of spectacular learning content for very little money and effort. So this is just a quick example of something that I did the other day. But it's an example of something that I'm seeing all of the more mature video-driven educational institutions doing. If it'll play. What did I do? Maybe it'll play. Let's see. All right. Well, I'll improvise. So what I did here was, yeah, it seems to be churning on the, whatever. I'll improvise. So what I did was I took an open educational resource video. And there's lots of repositories out there you can use. One place I go to is I go to YouTube. And YouTube gives you the option of marking your resources Creative Commons. So I went to YouTube and I said, and if you go to the search, the advanced search options, you can actually say, I want videos that are marked Creative Commons. And then you can take whatever you want. And so I found a video that was a role-playing exercise that was done in the context of a social work program, where two students were practicing their skills at being social workers. And I imported that, and then I put a quiz on top of it. And so what happens is, and I'll need you to use your imagination just a bit, is that the video begins playing. Oh, boy, that is slow. OK, I will skip forward a bit here. And so the video begins playing. And again, this is the one I took it straight from YouTube. And so the person on the left is playing the social worker, and the person on the right is playing the patient. And the person playing the social worker is asking the usual questions. Hey, why did you come here today? Tell me, what's bothering you, et cetera. And the woman is responding, as if she was an actual person coming to seek some counseling help. And then what happens is, at a certain point where I put a question pops up. In this case, it's an observation question, right? What do you witness in the visual frame? How is this woman behaving? She's avoiding eye contact, or she's bouncing nervously, or whatever. This is actually an important skill when you're learning to be a social worker, right? You need to carefully observe the person you're interacting with and try to use that to understand more about what the source of their issue is. So then the student answers this question, and then the video resumes. So the video goes on. And then we get to the next question. All right. Now this is more of a not a purely observation question of what's happening in the visual frame. This is a question about, what thing is going on? What technique in this case is the person using? Well, the person is, reframing the question or using sort of mirroring language or what have you. Again, really important in understanding how to become an actual social worker in this context. So then the user gives their answer, and the video goes on, etc. Video resumes. At some point, we get to the next question. How well is this guy doing? Is he doing a good job in this role play exercise? Could he be improved? You answer the question, video goes on, and then I'll skip to the end, but the next one here is a prediction question. Like, what do you think will happen next? Right? These are really important ways you can leverage. Now, by the way, again, this was an open, free video that I took and made a really interesting pedagogic object out of it. Because people think that videos often, and by the way, I'm a big fan of high production quality videos. Don't get me wrong. They're great. But people think that videos have to be perfect. And often they think they have to be perfect exemplars of what they're trying to demonstrate. But you know what? You're often better taking an imperfect example and using it as a pretext for critical analysis and thought and saying, what could have been better about this video? How could this student have performed better? What would have made this a better intake appointment? Right? That's a really intelligent learning object right there. And that you can do for free, basically. Take free content anywhere and ask students what could be improved or analyze this critically. That is a fabulous way to leverage open educational resources with video. So let me go back to where we were. Now, then, of course, all of this interactivity generates a tremendous quantity of data. I skipped over a few slides about how easy it is to make those videos, but anyone can do it. It's a very simple editing interface, and a teacher can just go in and say, I want a question at 30 seconds, and I want a question at 1 minute. And then this generates a whole bunch of data. So you, of course, get all the media analytics. Who watched it? How far did they watch? When did they drop off? Et cetera. But more importantly, then you get to measure the interactivity with that video. And in fact, the individual item responses. So this is a really important tool for your teachers. So going back to the video I just showed you, if most of the students got the observation question wrong, didn't notice the woman was behaving in a certain way, that's an important data point. If they didn't understand that the person role-playing the therapist, was doing a bad job at something in particular, that's an important data point. Yeah, question?
Yeah, so does the individual instructor get access to this data directly from within the LMS?
Yes, exactly. So what you're looking at right there, and so the Kaltura tool is, it's an LTI tool. So it iframes into the LMS experience. It looks like it's part of Canvas or Moodle or Blackboard or Desire to Learn or Sakai or any LTI compliant LMS. And the instructor gets this report right inside the LMS frame. Yeah. Yes?
So not perfect time to interrupt. We just launched IVQ, interactive video quizzing on our campus like this term.
Yeah.
So we're super excited about it. And I have math instructors that want to lead students to other additional videos at the end. So the reflection point question type is a possibility there, but I'd love to be able to actually put related media that's already in the system at the end maybe you could choose, hey, did you understand, or would you like to watch more? Type thing.
Yeah, you have a number of options. First off, we have, oh right, for questions, we're supposed to throw the box at people. So you can be on the audience. There's a number of options. First off, we have the idea of playlists, and those can be metadata driven. So depending on the way you've configured your metadata schema, and you can be as granular as you want. You can actually configure metadata schemas to say, these are about math, these are about math algebra, these are about math algebra quadratic equations, right? And the system can then create playlists for you that will show those to you. Another option is, so if you use IVQ in video quiz, and it's graded, the grade from these will go back to the LMS gradebook automatically. So you can send a grade back to the gradebook, and then if you wish, you can use the LMS's selective release. It varies by which LMS you have, what they call it. But they all have a capability whereby if you got less than a certain score on this particular assessment, you get this content item or that content item, right? That works as well. And then if you want to get really crazy, we're working now on something that will be out probably at the end of the year, probably an early fourth quarter, which has more of a branching capability built into the video experience. Yeah, I mean, we're modest about how far we walk down that path, just because other systems do that too, and we don't want to create too many parallel ways of doing that. So, you know, in many ways, I prefer the LMS to do it, because the LMS has more context than just videos. And maybe the combination of a video experience and something else is what really drives a certain path. But yes, we're working on building that into the video experience as well along the way. Yeah, I think you had a question first, ma'am.
I was just wondering, does it tie to the gradebook in all the LMSs? So like we're with D2L and it didn't for a while with D2L. I don't know if it is.
Yes, it does now with D2L. Yes, as of I believe like 2 weeks ago. We had to finish a bit of an API call, but I'm sorry, I got to get better at this.
Is the catch box
Yeah,
for
that's really wise. Thank you. Yes, please.
is the catch box for the recording or for the?
It's for the recording.
speaking? Okay, so everybody knows you're not going to be heard on the recording if you don't talk into the box.
That's right. Okay. Yes, please. And throw the box.
Okay, by branching, do you mean I'm thinking about an assignment or online training?
Yeah.
Hasn't been done that if somebody answers a question incorrectly, is referred back and has to review a section?
Got it. We don't do that today. That's a question that we're debating internally, whether or not it's going to add too much complexity to the authoring process or not. So we don't do single question branching at this point in time. We can do it based on the score on an entire quiz. Now, you could have a quiz that's just one question. I mean, that might work. But we don't today we'll send you the data about what individual responses are. But we don't do individual response looping or branching at this point in time.
Okay. Looping might be interesting just to reinforce something or to give somebody another chance, not just a go, no-go gauge.
Yeah. Well, if on an entire assessment you want to them, not let them go forward until they get a certain score,
right,
that's a function the LMS will support.
All right.
So that you can do. Yes. Okay, we'll have more questions. No, don't worry. So we get all this pretty interesting data out of the video experience and can feed it back to the instructor. But then let me go back briefly to the point about caliper. One of the problems with data, if you've ever gone to any vendor, including us, and said, I want all my data, which it's not a dumb question, really. Chances are the answer has been, with respect, you don't want all your data. Because the amount of data that's being stored is, especially with video experiences, is absolutely insane. I mean, we're talking terabytes, in some cases petabytes of data. So trust me, you don't want all of it. You want the right data. You want the data that's going to be useful to you. And that's the point of IMS Caliper and XAPI. Right? You want to know, did a student start this video? Did a student stop the video? Did they rewind it? Did they start it again? Did they view the same spot 4 times? Did they answer this on this quiz question? Right? That's the stuff that's useful. I mean, every bit about the stream and and maybe you want an aggregate, who's using Chrome or who's viewing mobile, sure. Yeah. But you don't want every single interaction point. It's not useful to you. It will explode your systems, and it'll make your BI work that much harder. That's why what we do with IMS Caliper and XAPI is we will, and rather than having you query and download and try to sort through the terabytes of data for what's relevant, XAPI and Caliper are designed to say, Jeff did this. Jeff did that. Right? It's triple of user, action, object. That's the stuff that's consumable by learning record stores and analyzable by the new generations of learning analytics software that will tell you what you actually want to know. And that's stuff that we will just send to you in a feed in one of these standard formats back to you. That's the data strategy. And that's what you should have in mind when you're planning what you want to do with this data in the future. Because that's the way you're going to end up with consumable, usable, and actually actionable data. OK. Quick time check. I got 15 minutes. All right. I'll use 5, and then we'll have questions. Couple other points which I do want to make about video. Especially when it comes to accessibility. Video actually has tremendous advantages when it comes to your accessibility strategy. First off, videos can be viewed and reviewed as often as you want, on the device you want, and certain people prefer certain devices over others, in the context they want, at home, in a classroom, with a friend, right? At the time that's most convenient, and even, as you'll see in a second, at the speed that's most convenient, which is a huge bonus for people who have special needs for certain kinds of accommodations. And with the right media management tools, these videos can be indexed and searched. So you don't have to rewatch the entire thing. You can jump right to the spot you want and just watch that part again. And by the way, but this is good for everyone. This is not just good for people who have special needs. I mean, this helps every learner learn more by giving them what they want, when they want it, on the device, at the speed, and in the context they want. In fact, the second point here is, for me, the most interesting. The single biggest kind of assistive support that is delivered on campus today is a note taker. And people pay students to share their notes or sit in and take notes for each other. We have seen in those schools that have done a thoughtful job of deploying lecture capture, we have seen a dramatic drop in the need for this. And moreover, for all students, this I find most fascinating, we've realized that students, when they come to class now, actually pay attention to the lecturer rather than trying to scribble down all their notes. Because they know they can watch it later on and take notes later if they want to, or won't need to take notes because they can watch it again. And so when they come to class, they can actually pay attention to the person who's trying to teach them. And that has been actually, so two fundamental shifts we've seen in places that have deployed large-scale classroom capture. Of course, there is a bit of a challenge around scaling up, because you do need to do some processing around this information to help make it more accessible. At minimum, you want it, in most cases, to be captioned. And there's a lot of things we can do to help out. The first thing is we can create workflows for you that optimize your post-processing of this lecture data by saying which assets should get which treatment. So potentially all of the main lectures of a specific class or a specific cohort need to be captioned in a 508 compliant way. And maybe TA sections don't need to be, or student-generated videos don't need to be, right? But we can actually help you specify, based on data that we know, this recording was done in this class or by this professor or in this context, those need to have this kind of captioning or enhancement treatment. So we can create workflows that do the heavy lifting in the background for you. To drive this, we can capture a lot of the metadata at the time that content is authored or captured. That will then drive those workflows. Also an option is crowdsourcing. We have a number of schools that are having that have an office of academic disability support, or has a staff of students that help perfect the automatic speech-to-text, which we do automatically, which is often very good but not perfect. You can have graduate students do it. You can have work groups do it. But you can actually internally crowdsource a lot of this perfecting. The other thing that's important is, with a very straightforward media management system, you can reuse a lot of assets. For instance, you can take lectures, and maybe the next year, only half of it's relevant. You can just snip that half and publish that half next year with all the captions intact. Or you can have your senior faculty, however you refer to them, create the sort of master set of lectures, and then have the TAs, or who's ever doing the sections, just grab the ones they want and put them in the LMS in the right contexts. So you don't need to recreate all those assets all the time. And this is all done with in-browser tools, so you don't need to have an expensive video producer or an overtaxed in-house video resource do all of this. You can permission the TAs or the faculty to grab, reuse, take out this 5 minutes, et cetera. So those are a lot of ways you can make it easier. And then there are some special considerations. Again, if you want afterwards to see any more of this, come by. I'm happy to show you some examples of how this works. Translations. Let's say you have a large Spanish-speaking population or a large Chinese-speaking population. Based on metadata tags that we can provide to you at the time of capture, you can say these assets should get not only captioned, they should get translated into Spanish or Chinese or what have you. There's a small additional cost to that for the actual labor, but we handle all the workflow and the heavy lifting in the back end to do that. This is especially important in ESL type contexts, where comprehension and learning of a foreign language is much greater when you have those captions. I speak bad Italian, so I watch Italian movies. I always have subtitles on, right? I learn a lot more Italian and I comprehend a lot more when I have subtitles on. Next thing, and if you don't have this turned, by the way, if you are a Kaltura customer, you can customize the player however you want. I mean, you can say which buttons are visible and not, and blah, blah, blah. if you don't have it active, we have the ability to give you a speed selector on all these videos. You can watch it more slowly while preserving sound quality. You can watch it faster. And if you have ever watched somebody using a screen reader, they can crank up the speed of that audio, and they can I mean, it's impressive. People can listen and actually comprehend hours of information, in a half hour of time by speeding it up. You can also add attachments to videos. So if you need a Word doc or a PowerPoint or what have you, which is not only useful for people who have accessibility needs, but it's useful for all students. Documents can live with videos, and they sort of follow them wherever the video goes. And finally, a couple of really special items. First off, we support having alternate audio description tracks. So if you're blind and you need a description of what's happening in the visual frame, we can support an alternate audio track. Because we do multi-stream video, you can have a second window where there's a sign language interpreter, for instance, or just a text box that says what's happening in the video. And down the road, what we're exploring is, because we expose all the metadata around videos and even the video stream itself to any third-party vendor, there are technologies which are not here today, but they are coming, which can do things like strobe detection for people who might have photosensitive epilepsy. All right, so all of this stuff, not all of it's here today. It's all coming, because this is the level of value that video can bring to your institution when it's properly strategized and implemented. Oops, sorry. So with that, I have left myself exactly 4 minutes for questions. Yes, someone, yeah, if you would huck the box.
Are those in-video quizzes accessible via keyboard, and do they have like a screen reader?
The whole thing is, yes. Cool. It's just HTML5. And everything we do, so we are WCAG 2.0 AA compliant. Everything has alternate keyboard shortcuts, et cetera.
Cool.
So yeah, we talked about how we implemented IVQ this term.
Yeah.
We did not implement with grading integration. We're a Blackboard Learn school. Our understanding is that you can't retake the quizzes more than once right now with grading integration with the gradebook, and that seemed like a deal breaker to us, but still able to implement it without the grading integration. But I'm interested, you talked about all those media analytics, and what I'm really interested in is how can we get that amount of media, or the media metrics that are most important, into useful, actionable data that instructors can take advantage of. I know that's already available with the media analytics that's in the LMS integration, but are there improvements coming to that in terms of the, I'm sorry, because I haven't looked at the comprehension media analytics yet, so.
No worries. So on the first question, I don't actually know the answer. I'll have to get to, afterwards let me know, and we'll make sure we get to the product manager who can answer the exact question about the Blackboard gradebook question. There might be a limitation with Blackboard there. I don't know. That's a good question. In terms of the analytics, so there's a couple things coming down the pike. So first off, yes, everything in the media analytics of what the students experience is visible inside Blackboard for the instructor, who will get a Kaltura iframe inside Blackboard, and they can see that all themselves. What's coming next is the caliper analytics. And this is going to be really interesting, and I have some sample screens of what Blackboard is working on. On this point, we're a bit dependent on them because, part of the value of caliper analytics is that just the video analytics don't really tell the whole story, right? It's the video analytics plus the rest of the analytics that Blackboard knows of that really tell the whole story. And so what Blackboard has is they're working on a new, and they're actually relatively advanced in this. They're working on a caliper visualization, not just for the back end, for the LRS and the BI tool people. They're working on a Caliper visualization page for the instructors, where all the Caliper information that Blackboard emits, that Kaltura emits, that Learning Objects emits, that VitalSource emits, can be rolled up in an instructor page where the instructor can really get a 360-degree view of what the student is doing. And that's what I'm most excited about. I mean, because really, I'm just a small piece in that at that point.
1 to 2 years out, any guess on that?
I think it's probably sometime in the next 12 months. I believe it'll be out.
Thank you.
Jeff, just going back to your review of lecture capture.
Yeah.
Is there any plans? We've been sort of looking at alternative lecture capture products, and one feature I really like is the ability for students to kind of review the lecture content and then kind of write notes. There's an area for them to kind of write notes. It's quite a personalized environment. So I guess my question is, perhaps you're a little bit behind the curve in terms of features for that lecture, and you're committed to adding features as we go along, and yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's a feature we're behind on. Something that I think we're going to catch up on in the next 12 months. I think on balance, we spent more time working on the interactivity side of the house and the sort of ability to search inside a video and have a rich video experience. But yes, that's a place that I expect we'll be catching up on in the next 12 months.
Okay, thank you.
Question types for the video quizzing tool.
Yes.
Right now, it's just true and false and multiple
Choice
choice.
today,
Is
yes.
there more coming?
Correct. And then we're going to shortly be adding multiple correct, Likert scale, and hotspot.
When do you think that's coming?
Probably end of this calendar year.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you all for coming. If you want more information, come see us at the booth, and have a great rest of your conference.